What's up, guys? C213 here, and today we're going to be talking about one of, I think, the most overlooked issues on the 2100 and 2150 carburetors, and that is issues with a leaking power valve. Now, a lot of people will say when they're having performance issues that, oh, your idle mixtures are not right, or you got dirty jets, or you got the bowl levels incorrect, or you have a fuel filter that's clogged. Now, all of those things will cause performance issues and can cause hesitation, even stalling, etc., right? All that can cause problems. But the most insidious, I guess, part of the power valve issue is that it will appear to change depending on where you are in the RPM range, and more importantly, how far the throttles are opened. So at idle, for example, if you have a power valve that is leaking, or power circuit, let's just say a power enrichment circuit that's leaking, it will appear to run very rich. So as a result, you'll lean out your idle mixtures so that it runs okay at idle. But then, when you give it gas and those throttle plates open up, suddenly it's running extremely lean. Even though the power valve is opening, you have leaned out your idle mixtures so much that there isn't enough fuel to deliver before the main jet circuit comes in. So now you're thinking, well, that's pretty straightforward, right? You did a video on how to test power valves and if they're bad, so then just replace the bad power valve and you should be good, right? Well, here's the thing. I don't know if this is the case with a lot of other power valves on other carburetors, but I know for a fact on 2100 and 2150 carburetors, especially on the two-stage power valves like this, there is an issue with the modern gaskets that they leak. And I found this out myself and with other people who have done the whole service, been very careful putting it back together, and yet still found similar performance issues that slowly deteriorated over time. And then when they took the carburetor off the car to inspect it and they removed the vacuum cover that goes on top here, they found fuel inside. Now, if you know anything about power valves, you know that that's a bad thing, because inside, underneath that cover, should be a dry, vacuum-only area. This little hole here is directly in line with your venturis, and that should be sucking air only, and there should be no fuel in this area. This cover will cover a vacuum section which pulls down the diaphragm of the power valve, which controls the inlet of fuel through here into the throat of the carb. So if you ever find fuel in that vacuum chamber, you know there's something wrong. Well, the assumption for many is that, oh, well, I got a bad power valve in my kit, and so they'll go buy another one and do the same thing. I know I did that. But the reality is I did that several times, and I finally realized, okay, I couldn't have had 3 different bad power valves. So what's going on? So finally I realized that it's the gasket that's leaking. But I thought, every time I use a new gasket, how could it leak, right? How could it be bad? It's a new gasket. Well, here's the first thing. The first thing, of course, is it's very important to use the correct gasket. So this is the correct gasket. It has the 3 centering studs in there so that they center around the power valve, because unlike a single stage, there is no recess for the gasket, so it will float around. Now, in the event that you don't have the correct gasket, you can use an incorrect gasket, but it is doubly important that you get the spacing correct, and that when you're tightening it, you continue to recenter the gasket until it is exactly where it needs to be. But this is the most important part. Number 1, you cannot put the gasket on dry. So if I were to take this gasket and just put it on like that, without, just the way it is, and tighten it down, not only will it leak, but it will tear as I'm tightening it a little bit so that the fuel will leak through. And the leaking on these gaskets never happens by like bypassing the direct surface against the body of the carburetor. It's actually going straight through the material itself. And that is only exacerbated with the twisting action without any lubrication. So here, let me just use this one to show you. So here's what you want to do. First of all, okay, when you put this, when you put on the gasket, when you're screwing it down, you want to use white lithium grease along the mating surface side that mates with the body of the carb. So where the power valve screws into, you want to make sure this side is lubricated with white lithium grease. In addition, and this is the most important thing that I think a lot of people overlook, because I did that and I still had leaking issues, and I said, what gives? So I got another gasket, and I realized that all I had to do was get some of this permanent, it's pretty dirty, I know, you can't read it very well, but it's Permatex Forma gasket, and this stuff stays tacky forever. And so basically, and it's fuel resistant and all that stuff, you take your finger, and this is a messy process, guys, so definitely get a pair of gloves and change them out before you continue with the carb service. You're going to take your forma gasket, squeeze it out, and again, a little goes a long way here. You're going to and you're going to do this on both the inner and outer edges of the gasket. And be careful not to get it on the actual mating surfaces. You only want this on the edge. Because basically what you're doing is you're creating an impenetrable seal around the edge of the gasket that's going to prevent fuel from leaking through. And that's what you want. And the goal here, when you're looking, by the way, on the side of the gasket, is to make sure that you can't see any of the dry paper material. So like if you can see little light, holes in your gasket layer, in your forma gasket layer here, you want to saturate some more with this stuff, because once it works into the material, it's going to prevent leaking. And additionally, you could say, well, you could only do it on one side or the other, but doing it on both sides, both the inner and outer edges, just makes it that much more secure. So do the same on the inside here. Now, for camera's sake, I'm not going to do that, but you get what you're supposed to do. So now you do that. Get your gasket on there. And again, if you're going to be using the incorrect gasket, if that's all you have, it will work, but you have to make sure it's centered. So we're going to go ahead and get some of our lithium grease on there. A little dab will do you. You don't need to go crazy with that. And I'm going to go ahead and wipe my fingers off so I don't get that gasket material all over. And now I'm going to spread out our lithium grease. Again, you don't want a big blob in one place. You want to sort of spread it around. So as you can see, you've got full coverage. And this is the important thing, especially when using an incorrect size gasket. You're going to center and start the threads on your power valve. You'll notice that gasket is totally not lined up. It's very biased towards the bottom. It's hanging down there due to gravity. You're going to shimmy it into place. Just barely get contact. Back it off a little bit so you can move the gasket and center it again. And then as it turns, slowly keep centering it. Make sure that basically it protrudes evenly on all sides. Continue to do that. If you see that it's even slightly more protruding on one side than the other, back off just slightly so that you can recenter it. And this is the important thing too. When you're finishing up the tightening process, you don't want to overdo it. So I'll give you an example. So you get it hand tight, and then you'll go ahead and you'll get a pair of pliers or channel locks or an adjustable wrench. Now here we can use an adjustable wrench, but you do need quite a large one, so keep that in mind. And you just want to turn it, about half a turn at most. Because again, the gasket should do all the work, especially now that you sealed it properly. And that's it. The gasket is in place. It will not leak. You won't have the same issues that I had repeatedly thinking, why am I getting all these bad power valves? I do the service, everything else works fine, but the power valve circuit is still leaking. Well, this solves all of those problems, so now you should be good to go. In addition, doing this way will ensure that the power valve will work for years to come, because that forma gasket stuff is much more resistant to gas and leakage, therefore, than the gasket itself. Because I don't know what it is with the modern gaskets, whether they've sort of cheaped out on them or don't put as much of the fuel-resistant coating on them as they used to, but I'm telling you, the fuel just goes through, especially since it's a very high vacuum circuit. It's not like all of the other places where there are gaskets that there isn't very high pressure. Here you've got manifold vacuum, pulling down on this section and basically pulling through the gasket. So the gasket has to be much more airtight than in all of the other places where it's basically just a splash seal. So in this location, that's why it is the most susceptible to leakage. So hopefully, guys, this has helped you out with any of your future carb rebuilds. I know this gave me a lot of trouble when I first started out, and I couldn't figure it out. So hopefully this helps you guys. Check out my other video on how to test the power valve. That's also a very good video to check out if you know how to get to your power valve, but you don't know how to determine whether it's good or not. That's an important video to watch. And as always, guys, I really would appreciate it if you give me a like, leave me a comment, or get subscribed if you want to see more content like this. Definitely let me know. I'm always interested to help people out. Now, with carburetors, it's more of an art than it is today. Because today with cars, right, you just plug in a computer and it tells you what's wrong. A sensor says, replace XYZ, whatever. You got, your O2 sensors out of range on the voltage. It's easy stuff. But with carburetors, it's sort of an art, basically. So If you appreciate this art like I do, definitely leave me some love below, and I'll see you in the next one.